Hey everyone, and welcome to the video. So today what I'm going to be doing is taking a look back at one of my most popular videos on this channel, and that is how to avoid burning on your OLED TV. So that video, obviously since the PS5 and the Xbox Series 1X, since the next gen consoles have actually come out, obviously a lot of people have obviously looked into OLED TVs, and I've seen a spike in that particular video being recommended to people, and basically people watching it and asking questions, leaving comments, and it's pretty much a very similar thing that I actually get in terms of the types of questions that I'm seeing. So what in this video, firstly what I want to address is the trolls. So for all of those out there that say don't buy an OLED because you have to do something in order to prevent burning. So for everybody that is going to drop that comment in the comment section below, because I know you will, I'm going to deal with that straight up first thing. So for all of those people out there saying that you don't want to buy, or nobody should buy an OLED TV because you have to do something to prevent burning, out of the box, if you buy an OLED TV now, a new one, you do not have to do anything to it. You can literally leave it as it is, and as long as you have mixed usage, you should be fine, and you shouldn't have any issues with burning. So that particular video was made for those that want to be extra cautious, and that's basically what I'm going to touch on today and expand upon today. So for those people that want to actually be a little extra cautious and just want to make sure that anything that they're doing, especially when they've got their new next gen consoles and they're going to be gaming intensively on it, and or perhaps worried about that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I've got a load of questions that I've had left on the channel, so I've picked out a few that are very common, and what I'll do is I'll read out the question and then I'll answer it. So here's the first one. So is it really bad to use 100 for both OLED light and contrast for HDR? It feels like it's meant to be at those settings for HDR. I'm so lost. So that was the question. So in order to answer this, what you need to remember is there's a difference between bright room and dark room viewing. So most of my usage for this particular TV, for my OLED TV, is generally darkroom usage. This room in the evenings is really bright, but generally whenever we're using this room for either gaming or movies or TV shows, things like that, we'll generally use darkroom viewing. 100 OLED light in darkroom viewing is going to be absolutely blinding. You may not think it, because obviously this panel will probably only reach 700-800 nits, but 700 or 800 nits off pure black, which if you're putting 100 contrast, then you're going to go from pure black right up to pure white, and that pure white is going to be extremely bright. So yes, I would always recommend for bright room viewing, you can adjust accordingly. So if you want to leave OLED light 100 to make sure you're getting the specular highlights, but then your contrast, you may want to adjust that, or you may want to just leave it at 100. That's entirely up to you. But for darkroom viewing, I would definitely recommend lowering it slightly. So what I tend to use is, for gaming generally you can get away with 80 for OLED light, and similar for contrast. That's generally what I tend to use, and it doesn't fatigue your eyes too much. Right, coming on to the next one. So this person, Chris Bird, stated that pixel refresher didn't work well on my B7. Even the mute symbol is burnt in. Not very clever interface from LG. So this particular person had a LG B7, probably 2017 TV, and the actual mute symbol, so what I'll do is I'll put it up on the TV now. So this symbol just here, I'm circling around, that's actually burnt in on his particular TV. And one thing that you will notice is it does flash up and off. On my particular set, it moves around. So obviously it started there, it's now gone to here. Let's see where it pops up next. But as you can see, it's gone back up there. But as you can see, it's a very vivid red and a white. So yes, that if you leave it on, I mean, in order to get burning from that, you must use mute a lot. But the other thing that you have to remember about this particular comment is it's on a B7 TV. So any TVs, I believe it was 2019, I'm not 100% sure, so it may have been the B8 and the C8 series. But basically at some point, LG Display actually changed the subpixel structure on their OLED panels, which means that your red subpixel, which is the one that most burn-in videos will actually show degradation on, it was actually doubled. The size of the pixel was actually doubled, which means that any TVs essentially 2019 or newer should perform a lot better in terms of burn-in. So that shouldn't actually be too much of an issue going forward. If you are just listening to the TV but not watching, turn the screen off. So I believe there is an option. In terms of where it actually comes up, it might be slightly different. So if you press the microphone button, turn the screen off. And there you go. So it'll give you a prompt, it'll give you a countdown, and it will actually say it's going to turn the screen off for any period, and the audio will continue playing. Now I'm not going to play any audio in this video, so obviously that would just look like the TV is off to you, but in theory, yes, you could do that. So if you're using it just to perhaps listen to a radio station or something like that, or if you're listening to a particular news broadcast or something, you just want it on in the background, you're on your laptop, you're on your phone, something else. We all do it where you've got something on in the background. I do it with football games where I've got a football game on even though I'm doing other stuff in the room. If you want to turn the screen off, yes, that's perfectly possible, and you can do that simply by using the microphone button on the remote and just saying turn the screen off, and then it'll do it after that 5-second countdown. So the next one is, was going to buy an OLED TV for gaming but really unsure now with regards to burn-in and these precautions having to be taken in to prevent it. Just want to turn the TV on without having to change settings, etc. each time. So this is very similar to obviously the thing that I responded to in the beginning of this video, and that is, as I've said, out of the box, most of your settings when it comes to burn-in prevention are already enabled. So if we come into additional settings, this is sort of like some of the areas. So you've got OLED panel settings, pixel refresher, I'll touch on that later, but your screen shift is enabled by default. So your screen shift is where it just moves your screen around a little bit each time you turn it on, so then it's using different pixels. So even when you've got static content, it's never actually on the same content for say more than an hour or half an hour, whatever the time is. I'm not sure on the actual timing of that. Logo luminance from factory is actually set to low, and then I've actually changed this to high because I actually prefer what it does on sports events in terms of dimming down certain areas of the screen. But both of those settings are already enabled. So in order for you to have to change settings, you would have to actually go in there and disable them. So from factory, as factory default, all of these settings are already enabled. Anything that you want to do on top of that, as I have done, that's where you're doing extra steps. That's where you have to think about what you're wanting to get out of the TV essentially. You don't need to worry about having to change settings every time. You just set it once, or you literally just leave it as it is if that's your use case. So coming on to the next one. So the LG CX also has AI picture and sound modes and other AI features. You never mentioned them in this video. Would you say that they are good for reducing the chance of burn-in as well? So there's a lot of confusion as to what AI picture and sound actually does. Now obviously the sound part straight away tells you that it's got nothing to do with burn-in, but AI picture is literally your modes. So that's basically where if it detects a certain type of content, it's automatically going to do things like enhance certain areas of the screen. So for example, if it sees a face, it's going to try and enhance the face tones in order to better match what it thinks is real life or more pleasing to the eye. I'm not sure which way it actually leans, but to be perfectly honest, most people that I've actually seen use AI picture and left comments, they say that they don't actually like it. So if I come into my picture settings and we come into picture mode, there you see even the C9 has it. On the C9 I don't believe I've had this on for long periods of time and then I've switched it off and I've never actually noticed any difference. Now on the demos that I've seen for the C10, it was a lot more prominent in terms of you can't see what it's doing, but what it was doing was not something that I would actually want. So it was actually changing the original content to what it thinks looked better, which isn't always the way most people like it. I prefer more natural image. I want to see what the actual creators wanted to put across, as they say, the creator's intent, as opposed to seeing what the TV thinks you want to see. So it's similar to the debate between dynamic tone mapping and HDIG for gamers. So HDIG is more original, it's more to the source content, whereas DTM is basically what the TV can do in order to make a more pleasing image. So yeah, AI picture and sound has no impact on burn-in, and that's not something that's going to help or deter in terms of burn-in prevention. So the next one, and this is more so in terms of the general sort of gist of questions that I actually get. So how long into a gaming session would you recommend playing a moving image to preserve the screen? Thanks in advance. This is one of the most common questions that I get, and the simple answer is you don't even need to worry about this. Like literally you can just do what you want. If you're one of those people that wants the TV to just take it out of the box, put it on the wall or on your media console and just play, then you can do that. If you want to be extra cautious, then you can do what I did. So for the first 200 hours, I reduced brightness, OLED light and contrast down to say 75, and then what I did was gaming sessions, sports sessions, anything with static content, I limited it to 2 hours. So that's for the first 200 hours. After that, basically there is no limit. So my son has used it for gaming sessions between 4 and 6 hours in one go, in one sitting, and up to 8 hours a day, sometimes even more during lockdown. That was all on Fortnite, which also had HUDs and static content on screen. And I've done very similar thing with football matches. So when the football restarted, I was watching back-to-back games. All of them had static content on the screen. I didn't need to worry about, oh, I need to play something else in between. So at the beginning, if you want to be cautious, then yes, for the first 200 hours, just tone it down a little. After 200 hours, I actually turned it back up to 80 contrast and 80 OLED light. And as I said, main reason for that is because of the environment that I'm using it in, and just to try and protect your eyes more so than anything else, rather than the panel. The panel I think should be fine. It's more so the fact that it'll fatigue your eyes quite quickly. If you're staring into specular highlights, that'll set to 80 OLED light. So the next one, so productivity monitor usage would kill it. There's many videos on YouTube where people have actually used OLED TVs as their desktop monitors without any detrimental effect. Obviously, if you're using it on full OLED light and full contrast and everything like that, you're going to increase your chances of burning. But if you're using it as your monitor, but you're also doing other things, so you're actually using it in applications, you're using it for movies, you're using it for TV shows, sports, gaming, everything else, then generally there's always moving content there. The only time you don't have that is with your sort of start bar at the bottom on Windows, and obviously your dock on Mac, and obviously your sort of file menu along the top on Mac as well. So those kind of things, obviously if you're leaving them static for hours and hours on end, then yeah, possibly somewhere down the line you may get burning. But it also comes down to what colors they are. Generally, obviously the red subpixel used to degrade faster than any of the other ones. That has now been doubled up, so in theory it should perform a lot better, but it comes down to a load of variables in terms of your usage. But I would not say that it's impossible to use it as a PC monitor or a desktop setup without it causing burning, because I mean there are examples on YouTube. You can just do a search for yourself and you'll see there are examples of people using them for 3-4 years with no issues. Okay, so coming on to the next one, so it's basically somebody who's been doing pixel refresher almost every week since they've had it for 1.5 years, and it says picture looks as good as when I bought it, should I stop doing this? If we come into the pixel refresher and also just going off the information that I actually have, so additional settings, OLED panel settings, and then pixel refresher. So pixel refresher allows your TV to provide the clearest picture possible. The process will take about an hour to complete and your TV needs to remain off. So basically what this does is there's two types of pixel refreshers. So there's a mini one that runs automatically and you don't need to worry about it. It does it after every 4 hours of usage, and it does it in the background once you've actually switched it off. Your manual one, you will get prompted for it every 2000 hours, and this is something that can be changed from within the service menu. So you can actually change both the duration for which the mini as well as the major pixel refreshers actually kick in. What my understanding of pixel refresher is, and from what I've been able to read up about it, is that it actually normalizes the panel. So it'll look for areas that have actually had more usage and it'll try and normalize that. The advice that I've actually had from probably 90% of sources is that pixel refresher, especially the major pixel refresher, over a long period of time will reduce the life of your panel. So if you're running it over and over again, essentially what you're going to end up doing is losing brightness from the OLED light, because it's essentially just dimming it down. It can't increase the brightness in areas that have dimmed. So the only thing it can do to normalize it is to actually cut down the brightness in other areas. If I use the reference of paint detailing from one of my other interests, when you polish paint and you actually make it look shiny again, you're not actually adding layers. What you have to do is you have to go to the lowest point in that crevice and you have to cut everything else down to that level, and that then normalizes it and it makes it look shiny again. In the same way, in order to normalize pixels, as far as I'm aware, I may be wrong on this, but this is what I've been able to glean from all the information I could find online, and that is that by normalizing it, it's actually dimming everything else down slightly. Now on these newer panels, so 2019, 2020 onwards, it shouldn't really impact it that much because they're a lot better in terms of managing any type of bright areas on the screen, and it'll dim those down. And I've made videos on that, so you can check those out on my channel. But basically, some people find that very intrusive. Some people don't mind it. I personally don't mind it. I I actually like the way it dims down the clock and the scorecard and things like that, so I can literally just focus in on the actual game rather than being distracted by these really bright areas on screen. But yeah, you don't want to be, as far as I'm aware, you don't want to be running this unless you actually notice something. Now the caveat to that is the first time you notice any type of image retention, which you will actually see a lot sooner than any type of burn-in, run the major one and see if it actually gets rid of it. And what you can also do is obviously just try different content in terms of if you literally only do one thing with your TV, you only game on one particular game and you've noticed signs of image retention on it, maybe in menus or other areas of the game where basically you don't see the same static content constantly, then that's when you want to actually use your major refresher, but you definitely don't want to be running this weekly. Right, coming on to the next one. So I ordered a CX 65-inch, never had an OLED or plasma before. I'll play games for every day from between 2 and 5 hours, 2 different games. How many breaks should I take to avoid burn-in? And is switching games enough to avoid burn-in problems? Yeah, you've pretty much answered it there. If you're playing 2 different games, literally just switching between them and having different content on screen should actually be sufficient. Even if you're playing just one game, so for example, all you next-gen console buyers who perhaps only have certain content available to you right now, if you're only playing one game, then what I would say is for the first, if it's a new panel especially, then for the first 200 hours, just limit it to 2 hours of usage and then just take a break. And then after that, once you've gone above 200 hours on your OLED panel, you should be fine to game for as long as you like. I don't think it will make any difference after that point, but if you wanted to and you wanted to just swap games or throw some other content on, that always helps. Okay, so the next one is, I recently bought an LG OLED GX. Does it help to prevent burn-in when the TV dims? I've set mine to dim after 2 minutes of inactivity. Not sure if that helps or not. Yes, it does. Also, approximately how many minutes is too long to leave the same image on screen? Yeah, so this is a common theme among a lot of comments that are left, where they're being so pedantic about it that they're actually looking to time things and figure out how long they can leave an image on screen. Most built-in apps and most external devices will, as you can see here with Apple TV, most external devices will actually have built-in screensavers. Some kick in faster than others. The LG TV themselves actually have built-in screensavers that will kick in if the external device isn't actually playing something. So for example, if you use one of the built-in apps, after a certain period of time, it will actually kick in and it will play a screensaver. Now, in terms of leaving an image on screen and the dimming part, so the dimming part, yes, that is essentially what causes burn-in. That's why you reduce OLED light, apart from anything such as movies and things like that, where it's only going to be a maximum of 3.5 hours, even for the longest of movie. So, and your specular highlights are never in the same place. By reducing your OLED light, you're reducing the heat that's generated on the pixels, and the heat is obviously what causes them to degrade faster. So by dimming the screen, you're actually helping to prevent burn-in by doing so. So yeah, that does help. In terms of minutes for how long you can leave an image on screen, the answer to that is how long is a piece of string. There is no definitive number. Just use common sense about it. So obviously if you have a really, really bright, vivid logo or image that you've got and it's static, and unlike this where it's just gradually moving through the image, if it's literally just stuck in one place and you've got something paused and there's no screensaver built in on that particular device, then obviously just switch up to a different import, turn it off, do whatever you want, but just use common sense. So don't leave it for hours and hours on end. Now, having said that, people have done tests where they've deliberately tried to induce burn-in by leaving it on a particular news channel that has a really vivid logo, and they've left it for 24 hours, they've come back to it and it's been fine. But personally, I would not recommend you actually pushing your luck and testing that. So just use common sense, just reduce the brightness, change the image, or just turn it off. Just common sense, basically. Okay, so the next one is, how long should one picture be presented to notice burn-in? Let's say the PS4 menu, for example, how long will it take the PS4 menu to cause burn-in? Also, if I play one game for 2 hours, you recommend switching content. How long is recommended to watch between various different types of content before switching back? So this, similarly, again, it comes back to the sort of hours of usage on the panel. If it's above that and it's not a definitive 200 cut off, that's just a sort of rough number that I've read has has generally worked on previous generations of technology such as plasma. The 1 to 200 mark in the past has actually worked very well, and it's meant that people haven't ended up getting image retention and burn-in. In terms of switching between games, if you're in that early period where it's a brand new panel, then you may want to do it basically every 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours. Once you're past that 1 to 200 hours of usage on the panel, then obviously you can decide for yourself from there. But we've on this particular TV, you can go to my burn-in tests on this channel in the LG C9 burn-in playlist, and you'll see this TV has a majority usage in gaming. Most of those periods after the first 100 to 200 hours have been 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours at a time sometimes. So it's once it's sort of bed in and it's sort of set up correctly, after that point it should be perfectly fine and you shouldn't have any issues with that. Right, so the next one, Netflix killed my C7. So this person was claiming that the Netflix logo actually burnt in on their screen. So let's just go into Netflix and we'll take a look. So I'm guessing the bit that they're actually referring to is this logo just down here. Okay, so what I'll do is straight away, you may or may not have noticed that, but straight away it's dimmed down. So from the point where it initially came on to where it is now, that's already dimmed down because it's recognized the fact that there's a very vivid red logo. So what I've, in my personal experience, and even here, the little N just there. So what, in my personal experience, what I've noticed is for any static content that is multicolored, it will kick in, but it won't be instant. On Netflix and things like that, where it's just pure red, if you just have a pure red logo, it's going to kick in very fast. So yes, on the C7, it wouldn't have had those improvements to the panel, and it probably wouldn't have had the same sort of built-in protections in terms of speed and accuracy in terms of recognizing static logos. I don't know whether they use an algorithm of actual logos, so for example the Netflix logo or the Apple TV Plus logo, things like that. It would be a lot better if they did, but they wouldn't actually need something like that. They'd literally just need to recognize the fact that there are pixels there that are basically the brightest on the whole screen and they're not changing. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. On the CX, do you suggest not to see movies with up and down horizontal bars due to different resolution between TV and movie? So he's talking about 235 content, so cinema aspect ratio, and also 4:3. I know there's a lot of people out there into anime, and anime obviously for the most part, especially a lot of the early stuff, was all 4:3 content. Realistically, you shouldn't really notice any difference in terms of watching that unless it is the only thing that you ever watch on that TV. And if it is that case, then obviously if that's all you watch, then it won't actually matter to you because the parts that are black are never being used anyway. But in theory, what used to happen on plasma TVs was if you watched purely 4:3 content and then you switch back to 16:9, you would have noticed that the edges of the screen were a lot brighter because they weren't actually being utilized. I can't imagine that that would be the same thing on an OLED panel, because basically black is just pure off, and the other ones, whilst they are getting usage, every 4 hours of usage, it's basically, as I said, it normalizes the whole panel every single time you use it. So because of that, even it doesn't matter whether you watch pure 235:1, you watch purely 4:3, it's gonna even everything out. So even though it may dim the screen over time, and most tests, by the way, where people have tested panels have actually shown that OLED actually retains its brightness much better than LED or LCD technologies. So they'll actually deteriorate at a much faster rate compared to OLED. OLED over, say, a year's span of constant use would probably only degrade by maybe 1 to 2%, nothing that would be visible to the naked eye, and you would literally need calibration software and tools in order to actually test what the brightness was when you started and what it was after a year's time. So that's not something that I think anybody will have a problem with or even be able to notice. So the next question, how often should I change channel? I play games 2 to 3 hours. Should I change every hour and put video for 2 minutes and then change back? Once again, initially first 100 to 200 hours, limit your gaming to maybe 1 to 2 hours unless the game itself is very active. But even having said that, most games, even when you say you're first person shooter or something like that, the area in the middle of the screen where you are, the actual character, generally that's always going to be very similar. So it doesn't matter what type of game it is, you've always got some sort of a shadowing or a specular highlight that's always going to be happening in certain regions of the screen. And for that reason, I'd say just for first 100 to 200 hours, just a precaution, if you want to be extra careful and obviously look after your panel as best as you can, limit it to 2 hours, switch up, do something else. Best thing for it would be to actually turn it off. So once you've turned it off, obviously if the auto pixel refresher kicks in, that'll actually normalize it for you. Go take a break and then come back and you can carry on. You don't necessarily need to switch to a different type of content. That is more so for the long-term preservation of the panel and actually making sure that once you do actually switch up and watch a movie on it, you're still getting that beautiful impact that the OLED TVs give you, and not something that's perhaps deteriorated slightly because you've never actually used it for that particular type of content. Right, the next one is one that I've had a few times as well. So this particular person is unplugging their TV at night. So what they do is when they switch everything off, they're actually unplugging the TV rather than leaving it plugged in. And whilst that's fine for all of the devices, because even in standby a lot of devices use a lot of power, for the OLED TVs I would suggest you never do that. So for as long as you can, leave the TV plugged in, because it needs to run that pixel refresher in the background, and it'll also detect. And obviously your major one, generally what will happen is it should, in theory, if you leave it off for long enough, it should actually kick in and run automatically. But your mini pixel refresher, which is the one that will actually maintain the panel along its lifespan, needs to actually work in the background. So if you're turning it off at the plug, or if you're unplugging it completely, then you're not allowing that to run, and that will actually deteriorate your panel faster. So yeah, don't do that. Leave the panel plugged in. Okay, so the next one. So whenever I pause a Blu-ray movie, I press the mic button, the remote, and say screen off. Yeah, so I've already shown that. So basically if you just say screen off or turn the screen off, it'll basically just turn the screen off. Now me personally, I don't do that. The Apple TV is my primary device, so generally what I'll do, I'll just allow the screensaver to kick in. The time for when the screensaver kicks in can obviously be adjusted. I think it's around 2 minutes on the Apple TV, and basically that's not long enough for burn-in to occur. So basically you can leave it for a couple of minutes and just allow the screensaver to kick in. If the device that you use doesn't have a built-in screensaver, then that's perfectly fine. You use the option of turning the screen off whilst not powering everything down, because I know sometimes when you power everything down and then you have to take the time of booting everything back up and getting back to where it was, it doesn't always carry on instantly. So yeah, I understand why people don't want to turn everything off fully, but yeah, if you want to just turn the TV screen off, then you can just do it by pressing the mic button on the remote and say screen off or turn the screen off. So the next one is, will it burn in if I leave it on 24/7 with still images on these settings? And he puts in capital letters, I don't turn my TV off. And the reply, I think that says it all. Okay, so with logo luminance on high, does it lower the brightness of the whole screen or just the logos? So yeah, with this one, what actually happens is the logo luminance, if it's on low or high, it'll basically figure out where the static content is, and then it'll dim the images, and it's basically looking for brighter areas of the screen as well. So if you have a really dim logo, you'll probably notice that it doesn't actually dim it at all. So for example, on some of my football streams I have the Premier League logo, and whilst it'll dim some of the other areas, it won't actually dim that so much because it's not actually that bright to start with. Now the difference between low and high isn't actually what most people would think. So low, people think, oh, it's not going to dim too much, and high, it might dim more. It's not actually that. It'll dim the same amount regardless. Low and high is actually how fast it kicks in. So if you set it to low, it'll gradually kick in slowly, whereas if you set it to high and it detects, as it did when I brought up the Netflix screen, if it detects a static logo, then it'll kick in straight away. So I personally prefer it on high, but obviously, as I said, that's something that is subjective. So if you guys want to actually do it on low to start with, just to see how it is, that's what it comes set to from the factory, so you can just leave it on that. Okay, so the next one, the only thing I'm scared of is I use subtitles for everything I watch or play. I have hearing loss. Will this increase the chance of burn-in? Technically and potentially yes, because it's constantly at the bottom of the screen. However, most use cases, if you take a movie or something, for example, most interfaces will have a sort of on normal TV I'm talking about. So standard television, so if you're watching TV shows, things like that, just cable TV, most of those will actually use a sort of grey background because they don't want to actually use pure white on whatever, they're not sure whether the contrast will be right. So they'll actually use a grey background on in between the text and the whatever the image is. So the grey background will actually help to normalize that area. Now on movies, you just get pure white writing, and with it being OLED, obviously you don't get no blooming around it, so it is pin sharp. However, because the text actually changes that much, I would think that it would take a very long time for that to cause a problem. And that's obviously assuming that you have all your other mitigations disabled and also negating the fact that you have the mini pixel refresher built in. As long as you don't have an issue with that, you've not gone into the service menu and disabled that yourself, then that should also be perfectly fine, and that will actually any normal day's usage worth of subtitles, it'll actually go in and normalize that. So no, I don't think you need to worry about subtitles burning in as much as that. In theory, like if you think about the pure theory of it, where you've got a dark image for long periods of a movie that is maybe a horror movie or something where it's all dark, and then you've got these really bright subtitles, and even that, obviously depending on what device you're playing it from, you can go into the settings and adjust the brightness accordingly. Generally most devices will allow you to adjust the brightness of subtitles because they realize that obviously if it's too bright, it's going to be distracting from the actual content. You want it on screen, but you don't want it distracting from what you're doing. Okay, so the next one is, so what about playing games that have a map, example Fortnite or GTA, since the static images wouldn't that cause burn-in as well? As I said, my particular TV has been used for over 1,000 hours, maybe closer to 1,100 hours of Fortnite gaming, and we've had all the HUDs enabled and it's not caused any issues. I do obviously, in between the gaming, I use it for sports and movies. We always watch all our movies on this TV. Obviously that alone, the mixed usage alone actually helps to prevent any type of burn-in. But obviously, as I said, the fact that the mini pixel refresh actually kicks in every 4 hours, that should be enough to actually normalize the panel, and it shouldn't actually cause you any issues. I've seen a lot of people that have used these for gaming on one particular game and having static content, and similar for sports as well. So even for football and things like that, where you always have a scorecard in the top left or the bottom left, even things like that in theory are static content and could have the potential for burn-in, but I don't think they would cause an issue by doing so. Okay, so the next one is, would you say it's okay to unplug the TV because I'm afraid the TV turn on during the night? I've kind of answered this in the past anyway, but in my experience in terms of usage, I've never once had it where the TV actually turns on it by itself. Even if it did do that, obviously it would need to detect a source. If the source device isn't used for a certain period of time, it'll turn off. So for example, if my Apple TV is triggered accidentally, it'll turn my TV on. If the Apple TV isn't used for a certain period of time, so for example, if I don't actually swipe on it and change the screensavers manually, then it'll just turn off. And if the TV then detects that it hasn't got an input, initially it'll go onto the no input screen where it'll switch between various pictures, and then after that it'll actually just turn off anyway. So I don't think that's something that you need to worry about either. So that's all the comments that I've actually had. As I said, I've tried my best to answer as many of the regular kind of comments people are leaving, and basically just dispel this myth that OLED TVs can't be used for anything other than just movies and TV shows where the content is always changing. This TV is prime example. This has been used for long periods of gaming. It's been used for long periods of sports events. Don't overthink it. Don't be too pedantic when it comes to burn-in. Leave the built-in protections enabled, and after that, just enjoy your TV. And for all of those out there that are trying to scare you out of actually buying one, just go in wherever possible, whenever possible, and actually experience OLED for yourself. I can guarantee you it will change your viewing experience. It's a piece of tech. Yes, they're expensive, and yes, we want them to last as long as possible. So obviously take what I've said in this video as advice, but don't let it bother you. Don't overthink it. Literally just use it as you would any other TV, and as long as you're not disabling the built-in protections, you should be perfectly fine. If you do have any more questions or comments, obviously leave them down below. For all you guys out there that are not subscribed to my channel, because I know my OLED burn-in video was basically seen by 92% of viewers that weren't subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe to the channel, because it helps me figure out what type of videos you guys want to see, what type of videos you guys are needing, what kind of of information you're looking for, and it helps me cater my videos to that. So subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so any new videos I make show up on your timeline and you don't end up missing out on any. And also just leave me comments in terms of what you want to know, what it is, what that question is, and what your thoughts are on this particular video. So other than that, thanks very much for watching.